With 29 games left to go in the NBA season, it's clear that the Chicago Bulls will need to evaluate their young talent as they move into a rebuild or a revamp. But the bigger question is, what do the Chicago Bulls do with their veteran players like Vooch and Lonzo Ball? We're going to be talking about that in today's episode. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you have found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today, we are looking at what the Chicago Bulls should do with Lonzo. What should they do with Vooch, maybe Javon Carter, as they move forward into the offseason? We know we have 29 games left to really go ahead and evaluate this team and start to make some serious changes, hopefully in the offseason. But before we jump into answering those questions about these players today, wanted to go ahead and let you know that about 64.7% of you that watch are not subscribed to the channel, so make sure that you go ahead and you slam dunk on that subscribe button, as it means a lot as we try to reach our end of the season subscriber goal. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the content today and really looking at just what is the plan going to be around some of these veteran players, because I think that it's going to be equally as important for the Chicago Bulls to really have a plan before we hit the offseason. And so I wanted to start with, I think, the most important player, and the player that I really do believe that is going to be moved in the offseason. I think it makes a ton of sense, but who knows? I mean, maybe he's still here, but I would say it has to be Vooch. And so what is really concerning here with Vooch over the last month is that really he's cooled off a bit, right? You see his numbers right now at 19.3 points per game, 10.3 rebounds a game. And so I've talked about this before. I felt like he's been resurgent this year. I felt like he's definitely, recovered his trade value, but the issue now is that he didn't get moved at the NBA trade deadline, and over his last 4 games he has cooled down very considerably here, because right now we're seeing that he's only averaging 13 points a game over his last 4 games. I know it's been a small sample size, but he's also too at 9.3 rebounds a game, so he's under the double digits as far as rebounds are concerned. And also too, he's been cooling down a bit from the three-point line, because last month he shot 26.8%. Right now he's shooting 35.3%. And one of the things that we've been talking about constantly on the post game, and if you've been watching the games, he's not getting the ball. I just think that he's not getting the field goal shots that he was getting earlier in the season, which, I mean, that's a bit concerning, especially if you're looking to, go ahead and trade him. I wonder if that is going to play a factor into, what happens over the summer. I hope this is something where the Bulls don't look back and say, hey, they could have got some more for him at the trade deadline, and they don't get anything necessarily that they want over the offseason. So hopefully that is not the case, but that is a real possibility that could happen. And so now it just comes down to, what are you going to do with him over the last 29 games? And so I definitely think that you don't want him to tank his trade value. You certainly don't want to do that, but you also don't want him to, I think, be in the way of the younger players, of really trying to evaluate them. And that leads me into really this next point, where Jalen Smith is going to really play a factor into this, because look, Jalen Smith over his last 4 games, he's averaged 16.3 minutes a game, but he's averaging 12.3 points a game, which is actually, I think, his best since he's been with us. And I've said this before, I think that, I want to see, can he start for this team? I think that there is a real possibility that he might have to start for us. And I just think at some point in time, the Bulls might have to start to maybe pivot a little bit more. Maybe you cut down a little bit of Vooch's minutes, and you really start to think about, okay, what does Jalen Smith look like in the starting lineup with Giddey, maybe alongside of Kobe White, if they don't move on from him, and some of these other players out there, Modest Mazelis. Like, you need to find out exactly what you have. And so I think that would be maybe an interesting pivot that maybe we see. We see a little bit more of Jalen Smith and maybe Vooch being out there together. Maybe we see more of Jalen Smith with the projected starters maybe for next season. Who knows? But I think that the Bulls will have to do something, and you can't just continue to maybe give Vooch the same usage rate, because you still need to evaluate some talent here, especially if you're looking to go out and draft another center too too as well, even if you do get, let's say a lottery pick center, you still need a player that is going to, I think, start over that player until you're ready to put them into the starting lineup. And that would suggest that Jalen Smith, I think, would be that player for you. And so I think that that's something to watch. Next up, another player that I think certainly the Chicago Bulls really need to take a look at here over the last 29 games or so, even though we know he's going to be here, and that's Lonzo Ball. And I say that because, look, we know that Lonzo is going to be the type of player that certainly can help, any player, any roster with just the way that he's able to impact it with the basketball IQ on the offense and the defensive end. We know he's a willing passer. He can get players their shots. He can get, a big into the areas where they can score. Defensively, he takes a lot of pressure off of you. I mean, there's so many things that Lonzo Ball does well that you love. He's a coach on the floor. And so I don't care how young this roster is, how gutted it is. I feel like that Lonzo is certainly a player that's going to help you. But I think the question now for Lonzo over the last 29 games or so is just, what is the direction going to be for him, for the long term here? Because, you think about it, look, I think that Lonzo has done a terrific job really each game and really just going out there, performing at a high level, coming back from an injury where I think a lot of people were wondering if he could. I think he's definitely shown that. He's also asked to increase his minutes. And I've said this, I think that I could see maybe a situation where he maybe goes and asks, hey, can I get maybe back into back-to-backs? I don't know if he wants to do that, but I would have to say that if he is able to do that, I really feel like if teams were interested in trading for Lonzo this season, I certainly think that they would absolutely be interested in trading for him next season if he can show that. And so I think that this is still very much him ramping up. And I want to see now, are the Bulls going to continue to maybe ramp up his minutes a bit more? Are they going to maybe ramp up maybe the games that he plays? Are they going to continue to throw him out there in the starting lineup? I want to see all those things because I think that maybe we have a little bit of an answer as far as maybe what the direction is going to be. And to make it clear, with Lonzo Ball, he actually plays into what is going on with your roster because when you think about, just the additions that we saw on this roster with, Trey Jones, with Zach Collins, with, Kevin Huerter, I think that with Lonzo coming back out there, that's certainly going to play into what you're doing with these players as well, because I think very much so, look, if you're evaluating them, if you're trying to flip them, you have a player in Lonzo Ball that's going to command minutes. How do you get these players incorporated in that? And then also, too, with the situation with Trey Jones, I think that is where it gets very interesting because, we'd heard maybe that the Bulls maybe are interested in maybe extending Trey Jones. So that's a question. He is on an expiring contract. How are you going to evaluate that enough with Lonzo Ball? I just don't see that the Bulls are going to necessarily go out there and maybe dial Lonzo Ball back in order to maybe take a little bit more of a look at Trey Jones or also to Kevin Huerter. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that, yes, with Vooch, it is going to be a situation where maybe the Chicago Bulls are going to have to make sure that, hey, he's still playing well, but you have to maybe dial back his minutes enough and see what you have with Jalen Smith, especially if maybe he's the player that's most likely to be traded here. Again, who knows? We're not in the front office. We don't know what could possibly happen, but just assuming that he is the player to be moved. And then next, with Lonzo Ball, what is it with him coming back? I think that it's absolutely great that he is coming back with the Chicago Bulls, and it is a player option. But what exactly do you do with him in regards to maybe evaluating some of these players that maybe you want to hold on to or perhaps you want to flip? So I'd love to definitely know what your answers are into that. So let me know in the comments. And so I just want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest as we try to reach our subscriber goal by the end of the NBA season out there. And look, even though the Bulls definitely have, I think, again, a very important time here over this last 29 games or so. Like, I think that just because Zach LaVine was moved, there is still a lot of work left here. And I think it's terrific that the Chicago Bulls have ownership back of their first round draft capital, and they can make some moves. They can send it out. They can utilize it. Hopefully they do, and hopefully they add to it. But I do think that, they're going to have to play their cards well, too, around some of these veterans, because if you do want to at some point move on from Lonzo Ball, then that suggests that you are still going to progress with him a bit more to see what he can and cannot do. And with Vooch, you do not want him to completely tank his trade value. I think that that is important, but you also don't want him to get in the way of a player like Jalen Smith, who maybe has to start for you, is showing signs. You need to get him in the game and see what he can do. And we're not even talking about a player that you did not even use in Zach Collins. Like, what are you going to do with him, right? He's under contract as well. And so, look, the Bulls have got to play that right. I think that the plan has got to be intact for this team to hopefully move from just being a team that has been in the bottom for so long and becomes a team that can at least become hopefully a contender again. And I'm talking about contending for NBA championships. I want to see that at some point for this team. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Go Bulls, and I will see you on the next one. All right, peace.